Boker Tov. Happy Purim. For some of you, that'll be later tonight. For some of us, that's the next day. Either way, there's 2 days of Purim. Today's daf is daf Tes in Yevmot, and we learn for our four shlam for Shlomo ben Rachel, for Yosef Asriel ben Chaim Michal, and for Elazar ben Ruma, and for Eli Nishmas Pinchas ben Elazar Elimelech Halevi. On yesterday, we already got down about almost 2/3 of the way down on Tes Amud Aleph. The Gemara there was discussing Rebbe's opinion. We had yesterday, Rebbe doesn't learn out from Oleh Oleh. He doesn't hold that whole drasha about Oleh Oleh to teach me that Yibam does not take place for a sister-in-law and etc. from there to the other 14, but rather he learns it out from V'lakach ulakacha and V'yabam Yibma. So what does he do with Oleh Oleh? So he uses it to teach me that where does Bezdin bring a Param Davar Shel Tzibur, and the Kohen Mashiach brings a Param Davar Shel his Param Davar only by Davar Shezar Kas Shigaso Chatos. That's what he uses it for, and the other Kabbanas as well. When you chayiv to bring a Chatos, only Davar Shezdona Kars, and then the Shigaso Chatos. The Gemara says, how do you learn out from? He learns it out this. So Rebbe learns it out from this Russia. It says no the Chatos Ashechato Aleh, and it says Aleh by sister-in-law, which is an erva, which is dona kars v'shigas achatos. That's what it teaches me. Also, you bring a chatos only when it's dona kars v'shigas achatos. The Gemara went on. You learn Kol Mashiach from there, from Lashon Sa'am, and what about for individuals? Because it says there vav mos v'alyin rishon. It says v'im nefesh shachas. And we learned that out from there. The Rabbana, and how do they know that whole thing? So they learn it out. The Gemara said because it says Rabbi Yeshua told his son, Torah chasiyah lachem lo'oseh b'shkaga. There's one Torah, and then it says right after, if you do avodah zarah on purpose and you are chayiv dona kars v'shigaso chatos. So there it talks about nefesh, any individuals, and then you learn out the tzibur from there because it's above most vayin rishon the other way around, and tzibur b'shar mitzvahs. How do they know? Because it's gzeira shava eina. That was all what we got up to yesterday, about 2/3 of the way down. The Gemara says, Rebbe Hai Torah Achas Mayavadle. What does Rebbe do with that drasha of Torah Achas? We just explained the Rabbanan know Rebbe's drasha that has to be Zorakars, Shigas Achatas in all the cases, whether it's Kohen Gadol or whether it's the Bezdin or whether it's individuals. They learn that out from the Rabbanan learned that out from Torah Achas. What does Rebbe do with Torah Achas? He uses that, he knows that drasha from Aleh and the other Gzeira Shabbos and Bava Sivani and Rishon. But Rebbe, High Torah Chasmayav, let me boil look at a time since the Torah made a difference between individuals and a multitude, not the whole Tzibur, but a city. If an individual does Avodah Zarah Yechidim gets skila, since they get the more severe punishment, their death, therefore their money is not destroyed, it's saved. Their Yorshim or whoever would get it, and Merubim, but in Ir Nidacha, since they have a lesser capital punishment of Saif, which isn't as severe, therefore the money is destroyed. So Yachal Nachlik becomes, I might think they have a different carbon too. Maybe the individuals, if they did, if a whole city did Avodah Zarah B'Shogeg, maybe they have a different carbon too, not the carbon skill, not the chatos of individuals that individuals have to bring for Avodah Zarah. So I might think it's not the same carbon. What's the chatzah there? It's a seira, as we said. Talmud Loma Torah Chasiyah Lechem, it's all the same. They all get the same. Torah Chasiyah Lechem, that whether, in other words, if it's a carbon helam davar shel tzibur by Avodah Zarah, then we have the special thing that they bring a par la'ola and a sor lachatos. But if it's individuals who did Avodah Zarah, or whether it's the Ir Nidachas who did Avodah Zarah, all the people in the Ir Nidachas did Avodah Zarah b'shogeg, they bring the same carbon. Okay, Maskal Rav Chilki of Me'agrunya. Oh, it's only because it says Torah Achas. That's what you use it from to teach me that they all bring the same carbon, whether it's Ir Nidachas or individuals doing Avodah Zarah b'shogeg, they bring the same carbon. Otherwise, I would say, have them in a nechlik, I would give them a different carbon. What are you going to bring? Each of these things have an individual carbon. My lysi, what are they going to bring? Lysi par. Should they bring a par? Sibur b'shar mitzvah sudamaisi. Shar mitzvah. In other words, par madava shel sibur. That's what they bring a par. Let them bring a kisba. Yachad b'shar mitzvah sudamaisi. That's what an individual brings. For most karbanos that individual brings for a sin that he does b'shogeg, most of those karbanos is a kisba or a sira. Sa'ir, let it bring a sa'ir, a male goat. So Nasi Bashar Mitzvah Maisi, and as we've seen, the Mepharshim say, everybody has their own individual carbon. So why would you think, what else could you give? It has to be this. There's no other choice. And Nasi Bashar Mitzvah Maisi. What about Parlo Ola Basar El Chatos? That's what the tzibur brings. When the whole tzibur does a Avodah B'Shogeg with a Helam Dover, with a paskin wrong for them, they also do. There they bring a Parlo Ola and a Sar El Chatos. Udamaisi. Elamai Seira, what are you going to bring a Seira? That's what an individual brings, a Seira when he does Avodah Zarah B'Shogeg. So what else could you bring? Obviously, it has to be the same. What else could it bring? It says this, no, I still need the pasuk. I mean, a whole bit Tzibur Bo'ra, Mais Bo'ra, since the Tzibur, if they paskin wrong for them and they did B'Shogeg, Avodah Zarah, they bring Parlo Ola B'Sar El Chatos. Inunami, the Irani Dachas that did it B'Shogeg, should also bring a nice Ibcha. They bring the other way around. Maybe they'll bring a Sa'ir La'ola and a par for a Chatos. Maybe they should also do that. Inami. Or you could say Tzarech, they have to bring something, but there's no other carbon to designate for them because everything else is taken. And maybe they just can't get a kapara. Kamashma, no, Torah Chasilachem, they bring the same carbon as individuals, meaning a Seira. Okay. That's how we apportion the psukim. And that's how we have the drushes. Either how do we know that a sister, you don't do even on your wife's sister, either because Aleha, and why do we need it? You might say, so don't you say, so we said, oh, the either whole ishti, or because of a hekesh. And then we had Rava who said, no, you really don't need Aleha for either the erva or for the tzara, because it's anyway enes adachlos yesh bakaris. It's only to teach me that the tzara shaloba makom mitzvah, where it's not falling to you from a brother who died. Your brother, it's not a case where your brother died with no children, and there's a case of yibam. In that case, the tzara is mutter. As we said, let's say the classic case is your mother. Your mother cannot be married to your brother because she's your father's wife. We'll talk about an exception to that today, but your brother cannot. So therefore, if your mother was married to Guy, right? Your mother's some guy, and he died, and he had another wife. You can marry that other wife, right? The tzara is not there's no issur of married the tzara. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to ask a question. Here we get into the little, I don't want to say complicated cases. They're really not that complicated. You just have to follow them. Okay. Amalei Levi LaRebbe. Levi was a Talmud of Rebbe, and he said to Rebbe, why did you say 15 cases? The Mishnah said there's 15 cases. There's a 16th case too. Listening to Zion. There's a 16th case. What's the 16th case? So he's gonna describe. So Rebbe said to Levi, I think Shein Lo Moach Bekadkado. I think this guy's got no brain in his skull. I think that's a stupid question. That's what he says. My diet. Why do you think there's a 16th case? Imo Anu says, Aviv, what are you thinking about? I'll tell you the case. Here's the case. Listen to this. Your father slept with a woman, right? And you're the product of that union. He didn't marry her, okay? Now that woman is your mother, right? Right? Is your mother. You got to hulk up here, boys. This is a simple one, right? Okay? Your father slept with a woman and you're the product of that. She's your mother. Your brother, your father had another son from a proper wife, whatever. Your brother married that lady. Can he marry that lady, your mother? Yes, he can. It's not his father's wife. Okay, it's a nusas ava, what we call nusas ava. So he said, okay, so your brother married that lady, right? That's your mother, and he died with no children. Okay, so what happens? Your mother falls to you even. You can't marry your mother. So that's the 16th case. That's the 16th case. And let's say your brother had another wife, Zilpa or whatever. You can't marry her either. It's Tsaras erva. The mother's your mother is the erva. The makom yibam. So there's a 16th case. What do you think? You think that's the case? My daitach imo nusasavav. Imo nusasavav plucked the Rabbi Rabbanan. That's a machlokas we had before back on Daf Dalet Amud Aleph. Can you marry your father had a relationship? Your father slept with somebody out of marriage, out of wedlock. Can you marry her? Rabbanan say you can. Rabbi Yehuda said no, you can't. Lo yigala kanaf ava. Rabbi Yehuda says you can't marry her either. That's a machlokas. In other words, what's your issue? You're Ruvain. Okay, let's say Ruvain. Ruvain was the product of a union with his that his father had with a woman that they were not married. Okay, and then he had a brother Shimon. That his father had from another wife, from a brother wife. Now Shimon married this woman. only according to the Rabbanan, you could be married to her, right? To your mother. But according to that's only according to Rabbanan. According to you can't marry her because you can't marry. Not only cannot you marry your father's wife forever and ever, whoever he was married to, you can never marry her. You can't marry your father's relationship, your father's woman out of wedlock, but mistress. You can't call her a mistress. You can't marry your father's mistress, right? So the case can never come out. According to the Rabbanan, the case can come out because you married your father's mistress, right? I mean, not you married. Your brother married your father's mistress. Your brother is the son of your father. He married his father's mistress. According to Rabbanan, he could do that, and then he died with no children. And it turned out the mistress is your mother. So there's a 16th case. Is that the case you're talking about? But that's a machlokes, he says. So Rebbe said to Levi, a student, that's a machlokes. My da'at imo anusasav. That's what the case you're talking about. Your mother, who's the mistress of your father. Imo anusasav is a machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbanan. We're not talking about cases. The 15 cases of the mission. There's no machlokes about that. Don't give me cases where there's a machlokes. That's a machlokes. That only works according to Rabbanan, not according to Rabbi Yehuda. Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, your brother could never marry your father's mistress anyway. Now, you might say, just as a point here, you might say that's what he tells the student. I think this guy's got no brain in his skull. So here he brings down here, the Perushim, interesting, Rishonim say this like that. He says, like, what is that a way to speak? Is that a way to talk? So is that a way to talk to your students? So it may not work so well today. But he asks the kasha.
Did you ever have a review like that?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. Listen, we have a rule. Divrei chachamim benachas tishma'am. Right? The Chacham says, speak nicely. That's what it says in the Mishnah. Honor your friend. It should be more your honor. Your friend's honor should be more than yours. And what is this business that we talk this way? You have a brain in your head, or I think you must have been sleeping. I think Rav was half asleep when he said this. Things like that. What does that mean? So he says it's a good kasha. But the answer is that even though they call that's the way the Rabbanan fight. We talk Milchamta Shel Torah, fighting, and it's a way that the teacher instigates his student to get serious and think carefully before you speak. Don't make any mistakes. Levi was a Talmud of Rebbe, like we say. Rambam says that a Rav, a teacher, is mechuyev to get angry on his students. If he sees that they're slacking off, they're slackers, he should get angry. It doesn't mean that he's really angry at them, that he's upset with you, but he should show anger in order to instigate his students. And that's when you find this lashon. I think you were asleep when you said this. I think you got no brains. Think carefully before you speak. That's what he means to say. Of course, they should speak nicely, but this is a way that a teacher, in this case, Rebbe was a teacher of Levi, so he said that to him. Okay, but in any case, do we have that 16th case? He says, well, you have a 16th case, but only according to Rabbanan, not according to Rabbi Yehuda. And we're not talking about machlokas. There's no machlokas here. Is that what's at the case? Or plukta lo kamari, says the Gemara. You're not talking about machlokasim below. Isser mitzvah v'isser kedusha. Later on, we're going to talk about in the second paragraph. Isser mitzvah means that, for example, Isser mitzvah. Example, you can't marry your mother. Can you marry your grandmother? The Torah doesn't forbid you from marrying your grandmother, but the rabbi said don't. Right? That's called Isser mitzvah. The rabbis added on. So what do you do in that case? Let's say your grandmother fell to you chalitza. Right? You had a grandmother felt you can work out a case very simply, right? Your brother, brother from father was married to your grandmother on your mother's side, whatever, right? And then he died with no children, and he fell. When he say died, mean no children. That's what we're talking about. And he fell to yibam. Your grandmother fell. So what do? Give her chalitza, because in the Torah you really need yibam. It's not forbidden in the Torah. So everybody said give chalitza. Okay, that's mitzvah. Isser kedusha is, for example, let's say your brother was married to a mamzeres. Kedushin's chal according to most, right? And fell to yibam. You technically as the chalosa say the mitzvah of yibam should be the chalosa say of marrying a mamzeres. The rabbi said do chalitza. Okay, so varisar mitzvah is kedusha. The pligi Rabbi Kiva Rabbanan. The Rabbanan say that even, for example, we know today if a kohen marries a grusha, the child is not a mamzer. But according to Rabbi Kiva, it is a mamzer because he holds even chayv elad and chayv is chayv mamzer and kedushin's not chal. So again, that would only work according to right varisar mitzvah is kedusha. The pligi Rabbi Kiva Rabbanan Biktani. And that case is mentioned. We talk about Isser Mitzvah and Isser Kedusha, even though that's a machlokas whether you do yibam. According to Bekiva, there is no yibam over. They can't have yibam because the Kedusha is not chal. Your brother can't be married to, you understand, the Kedusha is not chal. The Kedusha doesn't work over there. So there can't be an Isser of Kedusha of a case like that because if your brother marries mamzeres, there's no marriage. So if he dies, there's no yibam because there's no marriage, right? The yibam is only when there's a marriage, not when a guy has a mistress. So that's a machlokas. We're talking about in our parak. That case is in the next parak. Isra Kedusha and Isra Mitzvah we'll talk about in detail later on. But in this parak, there's no machlokas. And so he answered Levi, he says, what do you have to, hakminish kachaynik, as we say, right? What do you give me a case with a 16 case? That only works according to Rabbanan, and we're not according to Rav Yehuda, and we don't want machlokas over here. Either is machlokas. No. That's machlokas in the next parak. In this parak, there's no machlokas. He said, oh yeah? But Beishamai Matirnas Atzaras Lachem, we're going to have later on in this parak, Beishamai holds totally different than we've learned till now. He learned that the tzara is mutter, tzaras erva. Your daughter fell to even, your brother was married to your daughter, your brother died, your daughter fell to even, you can't marry your daughter, but the tzara you could marry, totally different than we've learned until now. Beishamai learns differently, and that's in this parak. Beishamai Matirnas Atzaras Lachem, Beisil Losrin. This is more says Beishamai B'Makom Beisil ain't a mission. It's not considered a mission. Not considered learning. In other words, we don't want any machlokus in this parak, and that's why the 16 case is not there, because otherwise the 16 case does work on Nususavah. Now the Gemara says, what about this? What's Eish Yisachar Shlomo? Let's quickly say a simple case. Reuven dies, right? Reuven dies, no children, and after he dies, his mother gave birth to Levi. Let's call him. All right. Now Levi grows up. And now he's old enough to perform Yibam. He's now 20 years old, let's say, and she's still waiting. The woman, Leah, is still waiting. Can Levi marry her? No, because it's Eshach Shalalomo. It's on. Pasuk says they have to share the world at the same time. Levi and Reuven were never in the same world. Understand? Reuven died, no children, left Leah, and there was nobody else, right? Nobody else. Now he didn't, right? Nobody else. Meanwhile, she could have gotten married. Right? Let's assume, or let's say there's another brother, Shimon. Let's say there's another brother. When Reuven died, he had a brother, Shimon. Okay, now that's what we're going to talk about now. And Shimon is here ready to perform Yibam. And then Levi is born. Now, Levi cannot do Yibam because it's Eshav Shalbolamo. Okay, so Shimon marries her. Okay, Shimon marries her. Later on, Shimon dies. Again, dies means no children, right? That's no children. Can Levi marry her? No. Why? Because Levi is Eshav Achav Shaloya Balamo. It's as if Reuven died with children. He didn't share a world with him. Okay. That's a machlokas. What do we mean? Machlokas. The pligi Rab Shimon Rabbanan. Later on, we're going to have some machlokas Rabbanan. Listen to this case. Remember, Reuven died with no children. Left a brother Shimon. Then Levi was born. Listen to what Rabbi Shimon says. Rabbi Shimon says, listen very carefully. If Shimon married Leah, the widow, before Levi was born. So when Levi was born, he was not she wasn't the widow. She was already married to Shimon. And then later on, Shimon dies again. Then what happens? Levi could make Yibum because that's Rabbi Shimon. The Rabbanan say no. Levi did not share a ring with Reuven. It makes it when Reuven died, whether Shimon had when the time Levi was born, if Shimon was already married to her or not, it makes no difference. Levi can never marry Reuben. It's like Reuben died with children, and Levi can never marry her forever and ever. No matter how many people she's married to, no matter what happens, Levi can never marry her because it's Eish Yisachar Shaloyo Balamo. That's the Rabbanan. But it's forever. It's like as if a brother died with children. If your brother died with children, you can never marry his wife, no matter what happens. That's the Rabbanan say. Rav Shimon says, listen, Rav Shimon says, that's only the case if when Levi was born, she was still zekuka. She was still what we call a yavama, right? She was still waiting. She was waiting to get yibum, right? She was a machakele yibum, right? That's what Rav Shimon. That's then Levi can never marry her. But if when Levi was born, Shimon had already performed yibum, even though Levi did not share a world with Reuven, then he says that he could marry her. If later on Shimon dies, Levi could marry her. He could marry her. Oh, so there's a machlokas. The pliger of Shimon Rabbanan, there is a machlokas about the Viktani, and you learned that, right? So what do you mean there's no machlokas in our Mishnah? First you say there's no machlokas, and then you say there is a machlokas. That's the next parak. Then you say you got Beis Shammai who argues about the whole thing, and he says you can marry it up. Beis Shammai doesn't count. Then you say, what about this? What about Eshach Shlomo? That's a machlokas. And Machlokes Viktani, the answer is Benolu, so if Yibam lo polig. Even Rav Shimon doesn't argue if what? If Levi was born and then afterwards Shimon married her. See, Reuven died. After the funeral, his mother gave birth. And then Shimon married her. So even there, Rav Shimon is moda that since Levi came into the world and his sister-in-law, the almana of Reuven was Kukali Yivum, she was waiting for Yibum, he can never marry her. So he says, Benola of Sof Yibum, if he was born and then Shimon married her, even if Shimon died later on, even Lo Polig, even Lo Polig Reb Shimon, even if Shimon's mode over there, that Levi can never marry her. You understand? This is okay. So there's no machlokas. I have a Rav Oshia. Listen to this. Cholaka, Reb Shimon af Rishona. He says, no, Reb Shimon. According to Rav Oshia, Reb Shimon argued in both cases, whether it was Yibam or Sof Nola, meaning if Shimon performed the Yibam after Ruvain died and then Levi was born, or if Levi was born before Shimon performed. Either way, Rabbi Shimon holds that what? According to Rabbi Shimon holds that Levi could marry her. Levi could marry Leah eventually when Shimon dies, either way after Shana. He tells Rav Oshia. Rav Oshia was refuted, so forget that. So again, our mission, there's no machlokas. Okay, Ivor, maybe Rav. Now listen carefully. Rav Chia learned the following thing about our Mishnah. Bekulan, in all 15 cases, I can call them. What does that mean? What does that mean? In all 15 cases, I can give you an example. Listen carefully, where you could have two sisters fall to two brothers. We'll call the brothers Levi and Yehuda. Fall to two brothers. Yeah, listen carefully. You could have two sisters who fall to two brothers, and the brothers can perform yibum or chalitza. What do we mean by that? Remember I said yesterday, we talked about yesterday, listen to this case. Reuben and Shimon are married to two sisters, right? And they both die in a car accident, right? Leah and Rachel, they fall to Levi. What's the halacha? According to Rab Shimon said yesterday, Litzror tells you, no, it's also no yibum, no chalitza, because that's what he learns out from Litzror, that when two sisters become tsaras to one another. This is not the case we've been talking about the first few days that they both were married to one guy. You have a woman and a tzara married to one guy. Here they were married to two separate people. Reuben and Shimon had two wives, Leah and Rachel respectively. And Reuben and Shimon died in a car accident. Now Rachel and Leah fall to Levi. What's the halacha? Rav Shimon says, no chalitza, litzror. The Rabbanan say no. What's the yisra? Achos kukaso. It's not achos ishto. Achos ishto is an erva, right? Your wife's sister, you can't marry your wife's sister. She's your wife, you can't marry her sister. But over here, it's not your wife, it's kukah. Both Rachel and Leah are zakuk to Levi. So what's halacha there? Chalitza. Technically, you could perform yibum. You can perform yibum. Achos kukaso is not minatorah. So minatorah, there's yibum. But the rabbi said, don't do it, do chalitza. Okay, that's when there's one brother Levi. Let's say there's Levi and Yehuda. Okay, you understand? Reuben and Shimon married to two sisters, and and Reuben and Shimon die, and these two sisters fall to Levi and Yehuda. Levi and Yehuda, right? Now, what can you do in that case? Is there a problem over there? So he says, you know what? In that case, each one is a chotz kukaso. Levi, according to Levi, both sisters are chotz kukaso, and according to Yehuda, chotz kukaso, right? So what would you say? Chalitza. That's what I said. According to Rabbana, you do either one. One does chalitza on one does chalitza on the other. Okay? Or technically one could do chalitza on both because they're two separate zikot. One is falling from Reuben, one's falling from Shimon, right? In the case of Levi, where there's only Levi, what is he supposed to do? Two sisters fall to him. He does chalitza on both. Because chalitza on one is just for one brother. You had another wife, the other brother had another wife. So here we have, let's say it's Levi and Yehuda, they also have to do chalitza. But 1 second, let's say, I'm going to complicate it more. The two sisters who were married to Reuben and Shimon, they fell now to Levi and Yehuda. They died in a car accident. Now you have two brothers, Levi and Yehuda. Now, Levi and Yehuda, if that's a simple case, well, each one is a chotz kukaso, so you have to run chalitza. Let's say, though, one of these two sisters was Levi's mother-in-law. It can happen, right? It's married to her mother. And the other sister was Yehuda's mother-in-law. Well, since Yehuda can't marry his mother-in-law, so is the other sister a chotz kukaso? No, because she's not zakuk to him. She's an erva to him. She's his mother-in-law. Yehuda has a mother. One of the two sisters is the mother-in-law. So Yehuda can marry the other sister. Why? Because only one sister fell to the Yibum. Reuben and Shimon died. They had two sisters. These are two sisters. There are always two sisters here. But one of the sisters was Yehuda's mother-in-law. So Yehuda can't marry her. He can marry the other sister. You don't say chalitza. You could do yibum or chalitza. Choletz is almost yebemis. The other sister was Levi's mother-in-law. So he can marry the other sister who's not his mother-in-law. You understand? That's what he means over here. Look in case. In all 15 cases, I can show you a case where Levi and Yehuda, the two surviving brothers, she's usher to one, his mother-in-law, or his daughter-in-law, or all 15 cases. The long Rashi over here gives you all 15 cases, describes each one. It's his mother-in-law, or it's his daughter-in-law, right? Daughter-in-law. So it's mutter to one, us to the other, and it's her sister. They're both sisters falling yibam together. Choletzes omis yabemes. You understand? If it's only one brother, Levi, and it's two sisters fell to him, and he can marry either one. So we say over there, chalitza, because achotz kukato. But over here, if you look at Levi and Yehuda individually, the two women fell here, but one is not sakuptim. One you can't marry because it's his mother-in-law or his daughter-in-law or his sister-in-law, and therefore he can marry the other one. So he says, listen, in all 15 cases, this works out. Again, look at the Gemara. And it's his sister who is his Yevamot. Rabbi Yehuda says, that's not all 15 cases. If you look back in the Mishnah, the first 6 cases, what are the first 6 cases? His daughter, if his daughter fell to him, talking about a daughter out of wedlock. Ubasbito, his granddaughter, Baspano, Basishto, Baspano, all the daughters and granddaughters. He says, we're not going to look at the first 6 cases. We'll take it only from the 7th case and on. In other words, only 9 cases from the 7th case and on. Rabbi Yehuda says, you know why? The first 6, my time, I'll tell you why. Because the first case is your daughter, right? And your daughter, it only works out where it's out of wedlock. Your daughter, you can't have a case of 2 sisters, right, of 2 sisters who fall to you, Yibam, let's say to you and Levi, who fall to Yibam, and it's in wedlock. Why? Because how could you have 2 sisters over here married to the 2 brothers? If it's 2 sisters, right, from 2 sisters from the mother's side, obviously, because if they're from the father's side, they have the same father. So we're talking 2 sisters from the mother's side. But if, let's say, Reuben and Shimon, who were married to 2 sisters, if it was in wedlock, if Reuben had a daughter with Leah and had a daughter over there, Shimon cannot marry her, right? You can never marry your brother's wife, so it had to be out of wedlock. What happened was Reuben slept with somebody, had a girl, and Shimon also slept with somebody. Shimon, the brother, also slept. They took turns with this girl, right? And that you could do that. Halachically, you just can't marry. You can't sleep with your brother's wife if there was a child. But if it wasn't your brother's wife, your brother's mistress, you could. Your brother had a mistress, right? And you slept with her. And your brother's mistress, that you're not supposed to. Obviously, you're supposed to get married, but you could. Halachically, there's no losase in there, right? You're not over on an isser if you did. You're over an isser of kadesh. You're not supposed to live with anybody unless you're married to them. But there's no. But it's not like an erva. It's not like you're married to your brothers. If it's your brother's wife, then you're chayiv kares for living with her. Okay. So the case of your daughter, if your daughter, you're talking about 2 sisters who fell from Reuben and Shimon to Levi and Yehuda, like the case we talked about, right? Reuben and Shimon each had a daughter. Well, how were they sisters? They were sisters from the mother's side, right? But if they're sisters from the mother's side and Reuben and Shimon were both married to her, that doesn't work because Reuben and Shimon cannot marry the same wife. So it had to be out of wedlock. So he says, since that first case, it only works out of wedlock, and that's lo mishkachsla, but Asu and Kamai, we're only talking about marriage, so I could say the mission, the case of the mission, are only talking about marriage, and therefore the 15 cases that we want to say works out with 2 sisters, and Yehuda can marry one, and Levi can marry the other one, doesn't work out if the daughter was in wedlock. So he says, I'm going to take out the daughter, and I'll take out the other 5 along with it, which also talk about daughters and granddaughters, etc. But Bayim says, no, even if it could work out this case of so again, like I said, Reuben and Shimon both slept with the same woman. They had what? They each had a daughter. The daughters had the same mother, right? And those daughters, what happened? They married. Let's say Levi and Yehuda, right? Married Levi and Yehuda. Levi and Yehuda died now, and now they fell back. Those girls fell back to Reuben and Shimon. Reuben can't marry his own daughter, but he can marry the other one. Shimon can marry his own daughter. He can marry the other one. So in all those cases, you have Rabbi says, so it works out. You can have a case. I can say, Rav Chia said all 15 cases in the Mishnah work out. You can have this case where it's 2 sisters and one can marry one brother, one can marry the other brother. Why? Because it's not a chotz kukato, even though they're sisters, because one is forbidden to you. One is your mother-in-law, or one is your daughter, or one is your daughter-in-law, and it's a daughter-in-law to Yehuda, but it's nothing to Levi. and the other one is a daughter-in-law to Levi, nothing to Yehuda. What about this case? That doesn't work out. My timer. It only works out according to Rav Shimon. Now, this is the Rashi about 10 lines from the bottom of the page. If you see the Rashi inside, in this case, we have Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun. Because here we have to talk about another brother in each case. Besides Reuben and Shimon and Levi and Yehuda, we have to have a brother who was born afterwards. So according to Rav Shimon, remember Rav Shimon said, what did Rav Shimon say at the top of the page? That if when the brother was born after, if Levi was born after Reuven died, if Shimon had already married the Almana, then, and later on Shimon dies, Levi could marry her. That only works out. So this case works out only works out according to Rav Shimon, as Rashi explains. Lo, my time, Rav Shimon only works according to Rav Shimon. It doesn't work out according to Rabbanan, because according to Rabbanan, they say that no matter who, Levi, if it's born after Reuven died, it's forbidden forever and ever. But Plukta Lokamai, we're not talking about a machlokis in our Mishnah. And in other words, the 15 cases that we're saying can work out with two sisters, and one can marry one brother, one can marry the other brother, because it's not skukoso, because it's only one is an heir to one is an heir to the other. So each one can marry the one who's not an heir to him. So, and it only works out in the last case of Eish Sach Shalei B'Lama, only works out according to Rav Shimon, not according to Rabbanan. So we're not talking about Chalokis. Rav Safar Matargam Af Eish Sach Shalei B'Lama. It could talk, even you could say the 15th case is that case. Umeshkach Shlo B'Shisa Achin, and it works out with 6 brothers. I'll leave it Rav Shimon. And if you just take a second to look in Rashi, Rashi says Eish Sach Shalei B'Lama, 10 lines from the other page. B'Meshkach Shlo Ela Leave Rav Shimon. Right, the Shari B'Yibam L'Sof, no, because he says if Shimon married her before Levi was born, it works out. The Simonach and the Simon is Meis no V'Yavim, Meis no V'Yavim. The Gemara says that too. I'm reading Rashi, but those are the next words of the Gemara too at the top of the page. The Simon is Meis no V'Yavim. What happened? Reuven died. Reuven and Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Ben Yaakov were all the 4 brothers from Yaakov. V'Nasa Reuven Shimon Shtei Achayos. They married 2 sisters. Umeis Reuven died. V'Nod Yisachar. And now the 5th brother was born, Yisachar. Yisachar was born now. He can never marry Leah, right? Can never marry Leah. Why? Because he was born after Reuven died. Okay. Umatzal Yivimto, Skukal Yibam. Asura lo mishmesrim shalavelamo. Yibma Levi. Now Levi married her, right? After Yisachar was born. Umeis Shimon Acharei came. In other words, Shimon married her, right? Shimon married her. Umeis from below Banim, lo Yisachar. Levi married her, and now Shimon, who was married to the other brother, to the other sister Rachel, died. But no, Zvulun was born. Now Yehuda married her. Levi married the almana of Reuven, and Yehuda married the almana of Shimon. Levi, now Levi and Yehuda both died, and who's left now? Yisachar and Zvulun. Now Yisachar cannot marry the one of Reuven. Why? Because he was born, when he was born, she was still an almana, she was not remarried, but he could marry the one of Yehuda. Because when Yehuda's wife, when Yehuda's wife died, when Yehuda died, he was born already. And Zvulun, who was born after Levi married the almana of Reuven, right? He could marry the almana of Reuven, according to Rav Shimon. So that could work out, but that only works out according to Rav Shimon, not according to Rabbanan. Because according to Rabbanan, neither Zvulun nor Yisachar can marry any one of them, because they were born posthumously. They were born after the other ones died. So it only works out according to Rav Shimon. So what do you see over here? You see over here, that's the case. Simonach, the top of Yud, Meis no V'Yavim. Reuven died, then Yisachar was born, then Levi married Reuven's wife, and then Meis, another time, Yehuda died. Nola, Zvulun was born. The Yibam, and Shimon died rather. Mesis Shimon died. Then Zvulun was born, and then Yehuda married her, and that works out according to Shimon. So what do you see? It works out. Here you have a case. According to you have 15 cases. That works out with 2 sisters can marry the two remaining brothers, whether it's Yisachar and Zvulun or Yehuda or Levi and Yehuda. Why? Because each one is forbidden to one of them and permitted to the other one. So this, right? You know, it's not a chot skukoso that you have to give chalitza to, because you could marry the other one. It's not an heir to you. So it does work out in the machlokas. Alma says Rashi in the second line. Alma tani mastisen hani plukta. the Rav Chia must koi. So you see, there is a machlokes. All this is trying to prove. Why didn't you say the 16 case? Levi, not Levi in the cases. Levi asked Rebbe, why can't you have a 16 case? And Rebbe says, what do you got? No brain in your head? He says, we're not talking about machlokas over here. There's machlokas. This works out of machlokas. So the answer is Ella. It takes out of Ella. The Rebbe, Hani Klali Leslie. Rav Chia said this. Rav Chia added on. He says, you know what? In all 15 cases, I could show you a case where it works out two sisters fell yibum, and they can each get married. Not a chotz kukas, so you have to give chalitza. Two sisters fell yibum, and one can marry one can marry the other. But it only works out in the case of Eshach Shlomo, according to Reb Shimon. So you see that our Mishnah does deal with the machlokas. So he says, our Mishnah is our Mishnah. Reb Chia is saying that all 15 cases of Mishnah also work out to this. I don't hold to that, Rebbe says. Rebbe, the author of our Mishnah, or editor of our Mishnah, Hani Klali Leslie, he doesn't hold that this business about all 15 cases in the Mishnah, also work out to be a case of two sisters can marry two remaining brothers because one is an heir to one, one's an heir to the other. You know what? I don't hold to that. I hold to 15 cases, and there's no machlokus in our Mishnah. I Eishes Achim is in our Mishnah, and there's a machlokus with Rav Shimon about that. Yes, but in the case of Nola L'Sof Yibam, if Levi was born after Reuven died, and Shimon then married the Almana, Leah, married the Almana Leah, even Reb Shimon holds that Levi can never marry. He only says that Levi can marry Reuven's Almana if when Levi was born, Shimon had already married Leah, but otherwise not. So you could say there's no machlokes in a Mishnah. I dismiss the Rav Chia, this all complicated case with two sisters. He doesn't hold to that. That's Rebbe, Hani Klali Leslie. That's where we're ending right now. Now, tomorrow's Gemara is going to say different answers, better answers. Understand the kasha? The kasha was, why don't you add the 16th case? What's the 16th case? If your brother married your father's mistress, and he died, so and that mistress was your mother. So there's a case of a 16th case, right? So he said so he says, no, that's only according to the Rabbanan, but not according to Rav Yehuda. It doesn't work according to Rav Yehuda. One of the answers we're going to see tomorrow is that our Mishnah must be according to Rav Yehuda. And our Mishnah, he brings proof that our Mishnah is Rav Yehuda. How can you ask me a kasha from the Rabbanan? Our Mishnah is Rav Yehuda. Remember, according to Rabbanan, a man cannot marry his father's mistress. So it can never work out that your brother Shimon, your brother Shimon, can never marry your father's mistress, who's your mother, and then if he dies, your mother would fall to you. That can't work out because you can't marry your father's mistress according to Rabbanan, only according to Yehuda. And only according to Yehuda you can. According to Rabbanan you can, but our Mishnah is Rav Yehuda. So so not only that our Mishnah is not dealing with the machlokas, our Mishnah is Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda holds you can never do that, so it wouldn't work out. That's one of the answers we'll see tomorrow. But the kasha over here was, why didn't you say the 16 case? Well, our Mishnah is not talking about machlokas, and better is a machlokas. No. Mishnah's talking about machlokas, and these 15 cases that you say work out with two sisters that you have to say it's according to Shimon. I don't hold to that business. Our Mishnah is 15 cases. I don't have to have that the 15 cases also work out with two sisters could fall even to Yud and Levi and they could perform Yibam or Chalitza. I don't have to say that. That's the first answer. Rebbe, Hani Klali Leslie. All right, we'll pick up from here tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, the second line there. It's kedai to see the Rashi inside. You got to go over it a few times. But the very simple case is the last case, Kalasa, your daughter-in-law. What happened? Reuben and Shimon each had a son. They each were married, right? They died. And then Yehuda and Levi, Reuben and Shimon's brothers, married those two girls, right? Married your nephew's wives. And then they died. So now you have two daughters-in-law fell to these two brothers. Reuben can marry Shimon's daughter-in-law, and Shimon can marry Levi's daughter. That can work out, right? You can have cases like this. So all 15 cases really do work out. You have to see the Rashi inside, otherwise it's just a dream. Have a good day. Call to.
Phenomenal.